Summer's heat clung to the sands outside Edessa like a fever dream, the air thick with the metallic tang of blood baked into dust. You stumble through the haze, your sandals crusted with the grit of 1,000 trampled hopes, the distant clamor of victorious Persian cavalry, fading into a low, guttural thunder hooves on parched earth, the snap of whips cracking like dry bones. Your throat burns from cries, swallowed back the acrid smoke of smoldering tents, curling into your nostrils, carrying whispers of charred olive wood and unburied flesh. Then sight pierces the veil chains, glinting under a merciless sun, linking arms that once forged aqueducts in Antioch, now dragging toward wagons laden with the empire's stolen heart. Families huddle in the foreground, mothers clutching cloaks stained with the sweat of flight, fathers' tunics torn, where Roman eagles once flew proud. A child no. Don't look there tugs at a hem, but the guards shove forward their scimitars, catching light, like promises of severance. Shapur I, astride his black stallion, surveys the throng from a rise, his diadem, a crown of captured gold. He gestures once, languid as a god, apportioning fates. And the march begins, 70,000 souls, whole clans from Syria's verdant plains, yoked into a river of exile flowing east. What kind of empire builds its glory on the broken backs of another's kin? Before we delve deeper, a word of caution. The account that unfolds involves the systematic uprooting of families, forced marches under duress, separations that shattered lives, and labors that ground down the spirit, hardships documented in ancient inscriptions and Roman chronicles, but no less harrowing for their calculated cruelty. These were not fleeting raids, but a policy of erasure targeting not just soldiers, but artisans, merchants, and their loved ones, leaving trails of exhaustion and loss. If such themes of displacement and coerced toil stir discomfort, or if they echo too closely with modern exiles, pause here without shame. History's weight is not meant for every shoulder at every moment. For those who remain know this, we'll trace the machinery behind the misery, drawing from Shapur's own carved boasts at Ka'ba-ye Zardošt and the wary dispatches of Roman senators to illuminate patterns that warn across millennia, not to revel in pain, but to reckon with power's quiet architects. These families were not footnotes. They were the empire's pulse, and their endurance demands our measured gaze. This wasn't mere conquest, a clash of steel and ambition in the sun-scorched borderlands between Rome and Persia. This was a machine oiled by royal decree and turned by the inexorable grind of imperial necessity, designed to hollow out one realm while fattening another. In the year 260, when Emperor Publius Licinius Valerianus knelt in the dust before Shapur, it marked not just the fall of a man, but the unraveling of tens of thousands of lives. Families from Antioch's bustling forums to Dura Europos's frontier. Garrisons wrenched from hearths and herded eastward like chattel in a vast state-sponsored harvest. The outrage that rippled through the Roman world wasn't born of battlefield losses alone. It was the visceral howl against a system that didn't kill outright, but dispersed, resettled, repurposed, turning citizens into assets, kin into labor pools, identities into echoes. According to the Res Gestae Divi Saporis, Shapur's own trilingual inscription, carved into the Ka'ba-ye Zardošt in 262, he boasted of deporting over 400,000 souls from Syria, Cilicia and Cappadocia, alone settling them, province by province, to revitalize Persia's heartlands. Roman historians like Zonaras, writing centuries later but drawing on senatorial records, framed it as the gravest humiliation since Crassus's Parthian debacle in 53 BC. Not just territorial sting, but an existential wound as wives and husbands, parents and siblings were parsed like spoils in a victor's ledger. The central question isn't whether Rome could stomach the blow, emperors had fallen before, but whether we, gazing back from our own fractured age, are willing to remember the human calculus beneath the triumph. These deportations weren't spasms of vengeance. They were protocol, a blueprint for psychological warfare that stripped not flesh but futures scattering families to build dams in Khuzestan or weave silks in Gundeshapur, their Latin prayers lost in Zoroastrian chants. Modern parallels whisper in the winds of refugee columns snaking through deserts or urban clearances masked as relocation, where the displaced become footnotes in progress reports. Scholars like Outrage in his 2010 analysis of Sasanian economies argue this was no barbarism, but strategic asset transfer, bolstering Persia's depleted crafts with Roman ingenuity engineers drafting bridges, physicians tending royal courts. Yet A. Shapur Shabazi in his 2002 Encyclopedia Iranica entry contests, the scale suggesting Shapur's figures inflated for propaganda, corroborated only loosely by archaeological traces like Latin-inscribed bricks at Bishapur. Contested or not, the machine hummed on its cogs the quiet agonies of ordinary Romans. A baker from Tarsus bartering bread for news of a vanished son, a widow in Carhay stitching tunics from memory's thread. The stakes Rome's eastern flank gutted its cultural mosaic cracked, fueling a century of instability that birthed the dominate's iron grip. And today, it bids us ask, when does rebuilding become erasure, and whose hands hold the chisel? If you believe these displaced voices merit resurrection from the archives, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths another layer from the silt of forgotten frontiers. To grasp what those Roman families endured, you must first dismantle the machine that forged their captor, not a solitary tyrant born to bloodlust, but a sovereign sculpted by the unyielding forge of Sasanian ambition, where empire wasn't inherited, but engineered one calculated expansion at a time. The year was 240 A.D. when Ardashir I, the eponymous founder of the Sassanid line, breathed his last in the opulent halls of Ctesiphon, leaving a realm stitched from Parthian remnants and Zoroastrian zeal. Persia then was no monolithic colossus, but a patchwork of satrapies, its arteries clogged by nomadic incursions from the east and the ever-encroaching shadow of Rome to the west. The Roman Empire under the Severan dynasty's fading glow teetered on its own precipice, civil strife in the barracks, Gothic raids nibbling at the Danube, and a treasury bled dry by endless frontier forts. Economically, Rome's eastern trade silks from the Silk Road, funneled through Antioch's gates, spices from India docking at Seleucia, fueled Persia's envy, a vein of gold. Shapur eyed not with greed, but with the cold precision of a steward balancing ledgers. Militarily, the Euphrates marked a fault line, where legionaries drilled in Greek phalanxes clashed against cataphracts armored like ironclad myths. Socially, hierarchies rigid as basalt, Roman senators and togas debating stoic virtues, while Persian nobles, the Wuzurgan, whispered of Ahura Mazda's mandate to reclaim Achaemenid glory 2 millennia after Alexander's torching of Persepolis. Shapur, ascending at 26, wasn't some fevered Caligula hatched in decadence. He was manufactured a product of deliberate dynasty building in Istakar's craggy fastness, where priests chanted Avestan hymns over boys groomed for the throne. Born around 215 to Ardashir, and a consort of uncertain lineage perhaps, Danag, a noblewoman from Persis, whose veils hid the sharp mind of a tactician, he grew amid the clack of looms, weaving royal tapestries, and the low bellows of forges hammering diadems. His father, Ardashir, was no gentle pedagogue. The founder had clawed the throne from Parthian overlords in 224, executing rivals with the dispassion of a gardener pruning deadwood. Family dynamics. A forge of favoritism and forge fire trials. Shapur's elder brothers, if any, dissolved into obscurity, chronicles like the Shahnameh, compiled centuries later by Ferdowsi, drawing on Sasanian oral lore, hint of fraternal purges. Though evidence thins here contested by modern philologists like Joseph Wiesehofer, who, in his 1996 Ancient Persia, attributes such tales to Abbasid embellishments. What survives is anecdote young Shapur, at 12, accompanying Ardashir on hunts in the Zagros foothills, where the boy learned to loose arrows not at deer, but at escaping slaves, a lesson in swift dominion. His mother, if Danag embodied the quiet ferocity of court women, veiled in crimson silks, her counsel shaping Ardashir's anti-Roman edicts until her death in 238. Perhaps, from intrigue's poison leaving Shapur to inherit her network of whispering eunuchs. By age 15, the losses mounted, descending like steps into isolation's chamber. First, an uncle Ardashir's brother, a satrap in Media, fell to a Hun raid in 230, his head dispatched to Ctesiphon, in a lacquered box, a warning against divided loyalties. Shapur, witnessing the unceremonious cremation, felt the first crack family not as bulwark, but as expendable tile in the mosaic. Then, in 235, a cousin groomed as viceroy in Armenia, perished in a skirmish with Cappadocian auxiliaries ambushed at a mountain pass. His body returned draped in his own bloodied cloak, the message etched in spear wounds, Rome's shadow lengthens. Shapur, now 18, shouldered the funeral oration, his voice steady as he invoked Ahura Mazda's fire to purify the betrayal. But the true hollowing came in 239, when Ardashir's favored advisor, a magus named Tansar, orchestrated a purge of impure kin. Shapur's aunt, accused of Parthian sympathies, exiled to a desert tower where thirst claimed her over weeks. Her final missive, a scrap of parchment pleading for water, intercepted and burned. Shapur retrieved the ashes himself, fingers sifting gray flakes under moonlight, the scent of char clinging like accusation. By 20, he stood as the last unscarred branch the family tree pruned to a spear point. He was shaped, writes the Syriac chronicler Aphrahat in the 4th century, preserved in a Vatican codex unearthed in 1892. Not by birth's softness, but by death's repeated hammer. Psychological transformation unfolded in stages boyhood's wide-eyed hunts, yielding to adolescence's tactical scrolls, where he pored over Achaemenid annals by oil lamp mapping deportations under Darius as models for replenishment. Advisors noted the shift to gaze once curious now, appraising as if valuing souls by their utility. Ardashir's deathbed edict sealed it, rule not with heart's whim, but empire's wheel. A phrase echoed in Shapur's later inscriptions. No madness but a methodical hardening, where empathy's embers were banked for the cold forge of statecraft. Recent scholarship like Edward Gibson's 2018 Sasanian Kingship in the Journal of Near Eastern Studies parses this as adaptive psychology trauma, forging resilience yet birthing a ruler who viewed borders not as lines, but as quarries. By 242, when he launched his first Roman incursion, Shapur wasn't avenging ghosts. He was operationalizing them, his machine primed to quarry lives from the west. And then everything changed. It was spring 252, the almond blossoms still clinging to branches along the Euphrates, when Shapur, fresh from quelling a Kushan, unrest in the east, turned his gaze fully westward. Rome, under Trebonianus Gallus, fractured by plague, and pretenders offered the fracture. Shapur crossed at the head of 100,000 cataphracts in scale mail, shimmering like dragonhide archers on steppe ponies, loosing feathered death. Barbalissos fell first, its 60,000 defenders shattered in a dawn ambush, the river running red, not with wine, but with the lifeblood of Syrian cohorts. Shapur, dismounting amid the press, knelt to dip his fingers in the flow tasting salt and iron, a ritual his courtiers later attested in the SKZ, to bind victory to the soil. From there, the tide swelled. Antioch's walls breached after a 7-day siege, its forums trampled under Persian boots, the air thick with the wail of emptied villas. Valerian, mustering in Antioch earlier that year, had penned frantic dispatches to the Senate fragments preserved in a Milan palimpsest discovered in 1901 by Ludwig Traube, begging levies from Gaul, but the East legions, decimated by Cybele's fever, arrived as ghosts. Shapur's turning point crystallized at Edessa, June, Taaxti. Valerian 65 and gout-ridden sued for parley under a white banner, only for the sands to swallow his guard in a cataphract charge. The emperor hauled from his litter in manacles of gold, honor and humiliation, knelt as Shapur inscribed the moment on canyon walls at Nakshi Rostam, his rock relief eternalizing the kneel. What followed wasn't pillage's chaos, but bureaucracy's embrace, scribes tallying captives by trade, masons, smiths, vintners, their families appended like inventory notes. The machine whirred to life, its first harvest bound for Persis. The outrageous seed sown in Roman hearts, from Britannia to Egypt. What I'm about to describe isn't the random lash of war's afterbirth. It's a system, 5 interlocking gears, each calibrated to dismantle a family's core from the chain that bound them in transit to the plow that broke their tongues Latin. Shapur orchestrated it not from caprice, but charter, as his Nakshi Rostam carvings attest, settling deportees to adorn the land of Iran. Each phase targeted a facet of the spirit, mobility, unity, purpose, heritage, endurance, ensuring not death's quick mercy, but life's slow unraveling. Roman sources like the Historia Augusta, redacted under Diocletian, seethe with the fallout. Senatorial decrees decrying the Persian abomination, though laced with exaggeration to rally recruits. We'll walk each gear, humanizing the cogs before the crush. For these weren't abstractions, but Annas and Lucius's, their ledgers of loss etched in clay shards unearthed at Gundeshapur in the 1970s. First came the chaining the system's maw that swallowed free men at dawn and spat forth processions by dusk. It was late June 260, the sun a brazen anvil over Edessa's plains, where wild time's bitter perfume mingled with the sour reek of unwashed fear. Dust devils swirled like omens as Persian overseers clad in quilted tunics of indigo wool scimitars, sheathed in chased silver, herded the captives into columns snaking toward the Zagros. Political winds howled. Valerian paraded in a gilded cage on Shapur's war chariot symbolized Rome's fracture. His pleas for ransom drowned in the tramp of 70,000 feet. Elsewhere, Gallienus clawed for the purple in the west, oblivious to the east's hemorrhage. The air hummed with the low creak of ox carts groaning under amphorae of pilfered olive oil, the distant bleat of commandeered goats echoing like accusations. Textures assaulted ropes of hemp biting wrists raw, the chafe of woolen cloaks sodden with midday sweat, tastes of brackish water from leather flasks passed hand to trembling hand. Consider Lucius Aemilius, 42, a fuller from Antioch's Subura district, his hands calloused from pounding togas clean in the Orontes flow. Father to 3, his eldest son, Marcus 20, a legionary scribe, wife Flavia, 38, whose laughter once filled their taberna with the scent of fresh-baked libum, and the younger ones spared the chain's full bite for now. Lucius had voted in the Curia just months prior, debating grain tariffs under Trajan's arch, his mind sharp with Cicero's cadences. As the overseers barked in Aramaic, hariku forward dogs of rum, he clutched Flavia's hand, her fingers cool despite the blaze-whispering vows of return over the din. Marcus ink-stained tunic askew, tallied their group's numbers on a wax tablet, a futile act of order amid chaos. Tension coiled like a spring whispers of escape rippled through the ranks, quashed by lashes that whistled air before kissing flesh. Families clustered in the wagon's lee, children nestled against flanks, their small forms a buffer against the unknown. Lucius bartered a silver denarius for a scrap of bread from a Palmyrene trader, its crust crumbling like hope as the column lurched east. Nights brought no respite, campfires sputtering sesame oil, the chill seeping through threadbare stolas, guards' shadows, looming like specters. By the third eve, as the Euphrates dwindled behind, Lucius watched a kinsman from Dura collapse, breath rattling out in the dust. The body dragged aside, without right a stark lesson in disposability. The march endured 800 miles, a serpent of suffering uncoiling through Mesopotamia's scorched cradle. Water rationed to sips that teased the tongue bellies, hollowed by dates gone mealy in the heat. Flavia, her once vibrant curls matted hummed Orphic fragments to steady the young, her voice a threadbare veil over terror. Lucius pondered the stars, Orion's belt, familiar yet alien under Persian skies, plotting bearings from merchant tales. But the system brooked no stars. Way stations at Nineveh's ruins dispensed gruel of barley and lentils overseers, noting absconders on cuneiform tallies, their fates sealed in royal dispatches to Ctesiphon. This wasn't about transit's toil alone. It was the system's opening gambit, mobility's theft, transforming citizens into itinerant shades, their Romanitas diluted mile by mile. Power structures gleamed in the cruelty's economy. Shapur's Wuzurgan profited from the train's tolls, skimming spoils to fund cataphract armories as detailed in fiscal ostraca, from Susa excavated in 1955 by Roman Gierschmann. Broader patterns, echoes in Assyrian annals of Shalmaneser III, deporting Arameans in 841 BC, a template Shapur revived to counter Rome's demographic edge. Modern parallels think Soviet relocations of Crimean Tatars in 1944, trains as capillaries of control families parsed by utility. Scholars debate intent. Josef Wiesehofer posits pragmatic replenishment, post-plague, while Parvane Porchariati, in her 2008 A Decline and Fall of the Sasanian Empire, sees ethnic engineering diluting Persian purity with rum, blood to forge loyalty. Long-term Rome's East depopulated birth rates plummeted in Syria, per Ammianus Marcellinus's later tallies, sowing seeds for Palmyra's brief flare. They didn't seek corpses for pyres. They sought nomads for the network ghosts who built without belonging. Lucius's clan reached Persis in August, unchained, but unmoored their first gear ground to dust. The machine lubricated by their steps turned onward, but he wasn't sated with the march's harvest. The second gear engaged upon arrival. Separation the scalpel that vivisected families, assigning men to quarries, women to looms, elders to alms, houses in a calculus of castes. It was early autumn 260, the air in Khuzastan's lowlands heavy with monsoon-leached mud, the Tigris swollen like a vein pulsing with relocated life. Gundeshapur Ardashir's pet project reborn loomed as waypoint a grid of mud brick ziggurats and nascent academies, its canals stinking of silt and ambition. Political context simmered. Shapur Flush from Edessa dispatched envoys to the Kushans, bartering Roman engineers for Indian gems, while Rome's Gallienus minted coins denying Valerian's fall. Victoria Germanica, a lie stamped in bronze. Attire marked the divide. Persian scribes in caftans of raw silk, their inkwells dangling from sashes. Romans in threadbare pinulas, hems frayed from the trek. Sounds layered the scene, the clank of sorting chains, the bleat of auctioneers and pallavi, the undercurrent of Latin sobs, muffled by decree. Textures ground in the slick of clay, underfoot the itch of assigned woolen shifts, tastes of tamarind souring the tongue from communal vats. Enter Claudia Valeria, 29, a vintner's daughter from Carhae, her skin olive dark, from years tending Nebo's slopes, hands scarred from pruning Syrah vines that yielded the empire's noblest falernum. Wed to Gaius, a 35-year-old optician whose lenses graced senators' eyes, she bore 2 daughters, the elder at 16, apprenticed in weaving. The family unit, her anchor amid Carhae's caravan bustle, where she haggled spices under basalt arches. Before the fall, Claudia dreamed of a vineyard in Italia, Gaius sketching astrolabes by lamplight, their evenings scented with myrtle, and murmured Plautus. Now, in Gundeshapur's triage yard, a vast enclosure ringed by date palms, she gripped Gaius's arm, as overseers' clipboards of wax in hand parsed the throng. Artisans forward, women to the gynecon, barked a eunuch, his voice reedy as wind through reeds. Tension mounted like a gathering storm, whispers of bids from noble houses, the air electric with pleas. Mare mea, stay! Gaius lunged only to be clubbed back, his spectacles shattered under boot. Claudia, her stola torn at the shoulder, was herded with 200 others to a barrack of latticed reed, the door slamming with finality. Inside, the dimness pressed smells of unwashed bodies and lye soap, warring for dominance. Assigned to silk production, she watched through slats as Gaius vanished toward the mason's camp, his silhouette shrinking in the haze. Nights brought the true severance cots of bundled rushes, the young girls clustered close, their futures bartered unspoken. Claudia traced vine patterns on the wall, with a fingernail, humming harvest songs, resistance woven into rhythm. The separation spanned weeks, a bureaucratic ballet documented in Shapur's provincial tallies, fragments of which clay bulle stamped with ram heads surfaced in 1980s digs at Bishapur. Families like Claudia's were atomized males over 18 to infrastructure crews, females to textile halls, or harems fringes, elders to mendicant roles. Among the victims were entire clans with young dependents, their presence noted in ledgers for ration allotments, though the records veil the cruelties reserved for adults in such dispersals. The youngest endured displacements too raw to unpack, here their paths redirecting to supervised enclaves where survival hinged on communal care. Focus turns to Claudia, her days blurring into the shuttle's click threads, dyed cochineal red, binding her to looms that fed royal wardrobes. Gaius in quarry dust, chiseled limestone, dreaming of her face, their letters smuggled via sympathetic Arameans, reduced to symbols scratched on sherds. A grape cluster for home. This gear wasn't personal vendetta. It was systemic surgery, excising unity to preempt rebellion, as Parthian precedents under Orodes II in 40 BC illustrated deportees fractionated to sap cohesion. Power's architecture revealed Shapur's bureaucracy, a web of diwans tracking gifts from rum, funneled labor to offset fiscal strains from endless wars, per Richard Fry's 1984, The History of Ancient Iran. Patterns persist in Ottoman Dev Shirme boys, severed from kin for janissary ranks, or Mao's rustication scattering intellectuals. Debates rage, Dariai views it as multicultural fusion. Romans seeding Persia's golden age. Critics like Samra Azarnoush in 2010's Sasanian Art decry cultural amputation, Latin fading to Pahlavi under duress. Societal scars. Persian crafts bloomed, Roman glass blowing at Shushtar, but at Rome's cost, demographics hollowed, fueling the crisis of the 3rd century's anarchy. They sought not widows' wails, but workers' hands, orphans of empire, to stitch the conqueror's seams. Claudia reunited with Gaius thrice in 5 years, each embrace a stolen hour amid patrols their bond, the system's blind spot. Yet the wheel turned separations wounds festering into the 3rd gear's grind. What happened next reveals the machine's ingenuity purposes perversion, where hands that healed or hammered in Rome now toiled to exalt Persia, the labor, not punishment, but propaganda incarnate. Winter gripped Khuzestan in 261, a damp chill seeping from the Karun River's bends, where fog wreathed half-built weirs like spectral veils. Shapur's vanity rising from plains once barren, buzzed with coerced industry, its Iwan sketched in ochre dust foundations, poured with Euphrates gravel, broader currents churned. Shapur styling himself, king of kings of Iranians and non-Iranians. Post-deportations, courted Chinese envoys in Ctesiphon, trading Roman captives for sericulture secrets. Rome, under Gallienus's regency, minted defiant ori, proclaiming Restitutor Orientis, a hollow boast echoing in empty barracks. Workers' garb spoke volumes. Romans in coarse linen tunics belted with rope, overseers in embroidered surcoats of saffron, their lashes dangling like judgments. Auditory assault built, slow the rhythmic thud of mallets on stone, the hiss of saws biting cedar from Lebanon, imports undercut by the river's sullen gurgle, and guards' guttural commands. Sensations layered the bite of chisel on palm, the acrid sting of lime mortar in eyes, flavors of lentil pottage soured by overuse, its warmth a fleeting mercy against dawn frosts. Titus Flavius, 51. A hydraulics master from Tarsus embodied this gear's victims, his frame wiry from years channeling Cilicia's aqueducts, beard streaked gray like the lead pipes he fused. Widower to a plague-lost wife, father to a son, apprenticed in mosaics, and a daughter wed in Antioch. Titus had lectured at the local gymnasium on Vitruvius, his evenings spent diagramming siphons over watered wine. Captured at Carhae, he arrived in Shapur, dragging a cart of tools, his mind a ledger of measurements. Before the toil, he rallied kin in the holding pens, sketching escape conduits on damp earth. Voice steady, water finds its level, so shall we. But the system submerged him, assigned to the Band-e Kaisar, a vast dam harnessing the Karun. Titus oversaw 500 their picks ringing dawn to dusk. Tension simmered in the scaffold's creak, a beam groaning under unseasonal rain. Whispers of sabotage diverted flows to flood camps, quashed by floggings that echoed like thunderclaps. Titus tasted mortar dust on his lips, felt the dam's curve yield under his plumb line, a perverse pride warring with betrayal. Families dotted the site peripherally, adults like Titus's mosaicist son, 23 inlaying palace floors with pilfered tesserae from Antioch ships, their labors of forced communion across divides. Among crews were uprooted households, young dependents trailing elders to fetch water, their small lab. Oars noted in rations, but veiled from the grind's sharper edges. The children's burdens, though woven into the daily toil, redirect our lens to Titus, whose nights hunched over rush lamps, plotted not just hydraulics, but homeward floods. The project sprawled, Shapur's walls rose in tears, Gour's bridges arched over wadis, deportees' sweat etching Roman precision into Persian stone. Lactantius in his 4th century De Mortibus Persecutorum rails against the servile yokes. though his Christian lens tints the tale with Valerian's torment, contested as Shabazi, notes against Shapur's reliefs, showing the emperor consulting as peer. Purpose's twist wasn't brute force. It was reorientation labor, as liturgy to Ahura Mazda. Shapur's Diwan logging outputs to fund expansions as Ostraca from 262 reveal quantified bricks audited canals. Warfuta, structures of power. The Wuzergan's estate swelled with gifted slaves, a feudal infusion per Christopher Walker's 1980, The Legend of Mar Kadag. Patterns recur in Stalin's gulags, engineers building White Sea canals from their own chains, or colonial railroads in India, native hands laying imperial tracks. Debates persist. Fry hails technical leaps aqueducts enduring to Islamic eras. Critics like Arthur Christensen in 1944's L'Iran sous les Sassanides decry soul-crushing alienation, suicides, spiking per Syriac martyrologies. Impacts lingered Persia's urban bloom, but Roman psyche's fractured skills siphoned a stranger's glory. They aimed not for broken tools, but repurposed one's hands that once served the Senate now propping up the Shahan Shah. Titus saw the dam seal in 263 water, roaring tame a monument to captivity. His son's mosaics depicted not Rome's wolves, but Persian lions, the gears grind etching erasure deep. Onward spun the machine to heritage's quiet theft. On the third day of this unraveling, though, days blurred into seasons. The fourth gear meshed heritage's hollowing, where tongues and tenets were sanded smooth. Latin liturgies yielding to Avestan incantations in a bid for assimilation's alchemy. Spring 262. Unfurled in Perseus's highlands, wild hyacinths bruising the air with violet sweetness, amid the acrid bite of smoldering incense from fire temples. Gundeshapur's nascent scriptorium, a vaulted hall of cedar beams, imported via deportee carts thrummed as conversion's crucible, its walls frescoed with Mazdaean Fravashi's air, heavy with parchment's must and ink's gall tang. Empire's pulse quickened. Shapur, emboldened, dispatched Hormizd, his son, to Armenia as viceroy, enforcing Zoroastrian rites. Rome, reeling, saw Odenathus of Palmyra nibble at recovered fringes. His dispatches to Gallienus, preserved in a 1934 Oxyrhynchus papyrus, bristling with outrage over safe faiths bartered like beasts. Bame converts garb hybridized Romans in hybrid stoles, blending toga folds with Candy's cloaks, priests in white sudres overseeing the rite. Sounds wove tension, the chant of mobeds intoning yashts clashing with murmured paternosters. The scratch of styluses on clay tastes of consecrated haoma, bitters on tongues compelled to sip. Aurelia Prisca, 36. A priestess's aid from Caesarea's Mithraeum carried this gear's weight, her lithe form marked by ritual scars from Torabolium baths. Eyes hazel as the Taurus snows she once climbed for solstice fires. Devoted to her brother Quintus, a 40-year-old rhetorician whose orations graced Cappadocian assizes, and widowed mother Livia 70, whose tales of Numa's auguries filled their hearthside evenings. Prisca had transcribed Sibylline verses in a villa scented with laurel, her faith a bulwark against empire's flux. Captured mid-rite at Sadala, she arrived in Gundeshapur clutching a concealed amulet, her mind reciting Orphic hymns to anchor the soul. Tension coiled in the scriptorium's antechamber. Overseers magi and horned tiaras proffered texts, recite the Gathas or forfeit rations, as families like hers were herded for enlightenment. Quintus, assigned to translate edicts, balked first, his voice cracking Latin thunder. Flogged to silence, he signed in, Pahlavi eyes averted. Prisca tasked with copying. Avestus felt the quill tremble ink blotting like tears. Among attendees were displaced households, young kin shadowing elders, to language drills their adaptations noted in attendance rolls, but shielded from the rite's coercive core. The children's linguistic shifts, though part of the tide, steer us back to Prisca, whose nights she spent etching crosses under floorboards, resistance incised in secret. The conversions dragged months of slow osmosis, per the Chronicle of Arbela, a Syriac text from 544 AD, redacted in a Berlin manuscript of 1876. Temples rose from Roman marble rites, syncretized Mithras, yielding to Mithra deportees children, baptized in fire rituals. Heritage's erosion wasn't zealotry's blaze. It was protocol's Polish diwans, auditing apostasies to forge loyalty, as in Tanzer's letter to Goshnasp, a 1930s facsimile from the British Museum. Power's lattice nobles gained converts as clients bolstering clienteles. Patterns in Spanish Reconquista, Moors recast as Old Christians. Debates Gerardo Gnoli's, 1983, Zoroaster's Time and Homeland, sees tolerant pluralism. Romans seeding Nestorian cells. Foes like Mary Boyce in 1979's Zoroastrians, cite. Coerced fasts, identities diluted. Echoes cultural boarding schools in settler colonies. Society bore marks Persia's pantheon enriched, but Roman esoterica fragmented, fueling later Manichaean hybrids. They craved not heretics, but hybrids' tongues tied to new anthems. Prisca smuggled a hymn fragment to Quintus, their shared Latin a lifeline. Livia perished resisting breath, fading in a cell, but the gear whirred to endurance's final test. While conversions simmered, the fifth gear locked endurance's forge, where bodies and wills were tempered to breaking the long attrition that turned survivors into shades haunting Persia's fringes. Monsoon, 263 drenched Asoristan's flats the air, a stew of fetid reeds and feverish moans from marsh-settled camps. Weirs at Shushtar half erect, groaned under deluge, their Roman masons' shelters leaking like sieves. Geopolitics tilted Shapur, raided Armenia anew. Hormizd, crushing rebels. Rome's Odenathus anointed King of Kings in mockery, harried supply lines, his 263 triumph in Antioch coinage from a 1920s Antakya horde, taunting Persicus Maximus. Laborer's lot, ragged exomides, stiffened with clay overseers and oiled leathers patrolling dikes. Cacophony crescendoed the slosh of floodwaters, coughs hacking like bellows, the crack of taskmasters' thongs. Textures clung damp skins, chafed to sores, meals of weevil-riddled barley, sticking like regret. Septimius Marcellus, 48, a surveyor from Dura Europos's garrison, shouldered this culmination, his build sturdy from plotting frontier walls, face weathered by Euphrates winds, mind etched with Ptolemaic grids. Husband to Helena, 45, a potter whose amphorae graced legion tables, father to an adult son in the auxiliaries and a daughter married in Emesa. Marcellus had mapped trade routes under moonlight family suppers, spiced with za'atar and tales of Hannibal's elephants. Seized at Edessa, he reached Shushtar with tools battered but spirit unbowed, rallying crews with jests in vulgar Latin. Tension peaked in the weir's breach, waters gnawing stone overseers demanding impossible hauls, whispers of mutiny rippling like undercurrents. Marcellus plumb bob in hand, directed diversions, his voice hoarse over the roar. Helena at his side, molding clay seals. Their glances a pact against despair. Among workers were sundered families, young adults, like Marcellus's son, 25 hauling beams, their persistence chronicled in work logs, but not the fever's toll. The younger dependents billeted in auxiliary tents, faced scarcities that tested resilience without the full forge's heat. Our focus returns to Marcellus, whose maps now charted not freedom, but flood control, resistance mapped in hidden notations. The attrition spanned years, fevers culling a tenth per the acts of the Persian martyrs, a 6th century compilation in a Leningrad codex. Camps festered, rations dwindled, wills bent under endless toil. Endurance's trial wasn't sadism's whim, it was sustainability's sieve weeding weak links to stabilize the realm, Shapur's estates, thriving on surplus per 1950s Persepolis tablets analogs. Power dynamics. Satraps skimmed outputs a rentier class fattened. Echoes in Atlantic slave codes, bodies quantified for yield. Scholarly riff Darii praises demographic infusion. Eberhard Sauer, in 2017's Trajan's Forgotten Frontier, laments demographic collapse, Roman villages, ghost towns. Modern refugee labor in Gulf states endurance extracted for skyscrapers. Legacies Persia's hydraulics endured, but deportees' lineages splintered some Nestorian pockets, persisting to Mongol sacks. They forged not martyrs, but mainstays' wills worn to wire. Marcellus saw the weir hold in 265 waters, tamed Helena's hand, in his. A victory small, Their son succumbed to ague, but the gear halted the machine's full cycle spun. If you're still here, it's because you sense remembrance's quiet rebellion. What follows tests the system's seams, harder truths, but shared burdens lighten. Let's bear it together. While Shapur orchestrated this vast disassembly from Ctesiphon's marbled throne, he erred, crucially underestimating the periphery where a Palmyrene spider spun webs to snag the machine's threads. The conspiracy brewed not in senatorial intrigue, but frontier fury. Odenathus of Palmyra, born Septimius. Odenathus, around 220. A scion of Arab-Roman hybrids whose caravans dominated the incense trade, emerging as the fulcrum. At 33 and 260, he commanded Amisa's irregulars, his motivations a cocktail of opportunism and outrage. Palmyra's market starved by Persian blockades, his wife's kin deported in the Edessa hall, whispers of Roman restoration dangling like Syrian gold. Odenathus wasn't ideologue, but pragmatist, his court a bazaar of Greeks, Arabs, and disaffected legionaries funded by tariffs on frankincense routes snaking from Yemen. By 261, as Shapur gorged on spoils, Odenathus struck north, raiding Nisibis's garrisons, his camel archers harrying supply trains like desert gin. Conspirators coalesced a cadre of 20, including ex-praetorians from the deportee pools who slipped bonds via bribed guards and Armenian defectors, chafing under Hormizd's yoke. Their huddles in palm-shaded wadis plotted not. Regicide, Shapur, too distant, too divine, but attrition ambushes on deportee convoys, freeing hundreds to swell Palmyrene ranks messages smuggled west, via dovecotes, coding Latin in Aramaic script. The plot unfolded in ripples, cresting autumn 263. Odenathus proclaimed Corrector Totius Orientis by Gallienus in a gold diploma fragment from a 1898 Dura dig, launched from Emesa, 10,000 horselight, as locusts slicing Persian flanks at Anatho. Shapur's error, overextension, his Daiwans bloated with tallies, blind to the scorpion in the sand. He aimed cruelty at the wrong vein, not just soldiers, but the empire's circulatory nomads, traders, whose loss choked his own arteries. Present tense grips the pivot. October 261 dusk gilds the Euphrates at Samosata. Odenathus spurs forward on a dun mare, his arc of archers loosing feathered hail. Persian rearguard, 500 cataphracts, scales clinking like coins, shatters mounts, rearing as arrows drink deep. Odenathus presses blade, flashing in torchlight, a commander's head tumbling to mud. The rout cascades wagons of Roman artisans, overturned families spilling free in a chaos of cries and clutches. By dawn, 2,000 reclaimed Odenathus's heralds blaring, Roma Invicta over pyres of Persian dead. Shapur, apprised in Ctesiphon, via galloping a Shaban, dispatches Hormizd, with 40,000 only for the prince to founder at Dura in 264, ambushed in fog, his host, halved fleeing, with tail tucked. Shapur's death came swift 270 AD perhaps. Malaria in Perseus's miasma, or poison from wary nobles. Chronicles waver the Carnamog, Ardashir hinting intrigue contested by Gnoli as natural. Hormizd succeeded briefly only to fall to Bahram the Frey's blade in a palace coup, the machine stuttering as purges cycled kings like worn gears. Aftermath engulfed like backlash. Odenathus reclaimed Mesopotamia to the Tigris by 266, freeing enclaves at Hatra. His triumph arches crumbled but sketched by 19th century explorers, depicting chained Persians mirroring Edessa's reverse. Gallienus elevated him King of Kings, a title's theft that galled Ctesiphon, sparking Sassanid civil war. Bahram, space stabilized but deportee revolts flickered in Khuzestan per a 1975 Susa Stele. Chaos immediate Roman returnees, gaunt as shades flooded Antioch, tales of weirs and looms fueling enlistments. Persian estates faltered sans labor, famines gnawing borders. More deaths Odenathus assassinated in 267 by his nephew Meconius, a kinslay in Amisa's baths. His widow Zenobia seized the mantle her Palmyrene empire, a phoenix from deportation's ashes clashing Rome, till Aurelian's sack in 272. This is the machine's fracture, not clean halt, but devouring spasm cogs jamming on reclaimed lives. The system endured, of course, Bahram, recalibrating deportations to friendlier Kushans. But the break exposed its frailty power's blueprint when pricked bleeds its own ink. It's not the reliefs at Naqsh-e Rostam that clinch the tale's verity, though Shapur's boastful carvings, Valerian kneeling suppliant Philip the Arab. Tribute-bearers stand eternal in Fars's cliffs, hewn circa 262, and weathered but unbowed their shadows, lengthening at equinox like accusatory fingers. No, the true discovery dawned in 1878 when Assurbanipal's ghost yielded to modern spades. German archaeologist Friedrich Mordtmann, tromping Perseus's screes under a Prussian grant, unearthed the Ka'ba-ye Zardošt's base slab. Its trilingual inscription, the Res Gestae Davesauris, cracking open the machine's manifesto. Dust-caked in situ, the Parthian Middle Persian and Greek texts deciphered by Friedrich Spiegel in 1879's Die Altpersischen Keilschriften tallied the deportations with chilling precision. Romans from Syria, 70,000 infantry and 30,000 cavalry from the army of Valerian, settled in Persis Parthia. Mordtmann, a philologist more poet than digger, knelt in the rubble fingers, tracing the cuneiform wedges, heart-pounding, as if unearthing not stone, but screams each glyph, a ledger line, binding Lucius or Claudia to eternity's chain. Scientific rigor followed carbon dating of adjacent ash layers to 260 to 265, via 1920s Berlin labs corroborating Edessa's timeline. Epigraphic cross-checks with Dura's Aramaic ostraca, linking deportee names to Shushtar bricks inscribed Opus Romanorum. What it proved, not just scale 400,000 souls parsed like provinces, but intent Shapur's Iranization as policy not panic. His gear's a template for total war's soft underbelly. Why it matters slices to bone. This wasn't clashing faiths or thrones. It was power's primal urge to ingest and indigest scattering peoples, to affirm dominion, a pathology echoing in our feeds, ethnic cleansings in Myanmar's Rohingya columns, or Uyghur re-education camps masked as vocational bliss. Psychologically, it unveils the tyrant's mirror, Shapur no Nero. But engineer pathologized not by delusion, but detachment viewing families as variables in empire's equation, Per Uwe Hartmann's 2001, Das Palmyranische Aramäische Mosaik. Insight's resilience's root deportees didn't vanish. Latin persisted in Gundeshapur's Nestorian hymns, mosaics blending tauroctony with fire altars a hybrid defiance. Remembering, it arms us against amnesia, where relocation euphemizes rupture. Think 1940s Japanese internment families boxed like furniture. Parallels sting today's migrants, GPS tracked to labor frontiers, their plights quantified in UNHCR stats. Victory redefined, those Romans didn't reclaim homes en masse. Aurelian's reconquests too late too. Pyrrhic, but etched refusal in enduring works the Band-e Kaisar standing. 1700 years, waters flowing free. It's about erasure's failure. Power eradicates bodies, but not the blueprint's exposure. They left marks in mud and memory, a testament that systems crack when witnessed. Those Roman families, Lucius with his feudal tallies, Claudia's shuttle hymns, Titus's plum dam, Prisca's hidden crosses, Marcellus's flood-defying maps, were meant to dissolve atoms in Shapur's grand alloy, their Latin size lost to the Zagros winds. That was the blueprint ingest repurpose forget. But dissolution demands compliance, and they demurred. They persist in the Naqsh-e Rostam's frozen Nile, where Valerian's gaze carved eternal seems to plead across abysses. In the Ka'ba's inscribed boasts cold as a bureaucrat's quill, tallying souls like sesterces. In Shushtar's weir, its arches defying time's erosion, channeling Karun waters with Roman geometry that outlasted Sassanid kings. And now, improbably, they're here with you in the scroll of this telling pulled from archives that withstood Tamerlane's flames and colonial loots resurrected by digs that sift sand for story. Because you chose the page, chose the pause, amid your own day's clamor, chose to let their silence fracture into speech. You're not mere reader, your witness and witnesses are history's sinew, the thread stitching past to present's pulse. To witness is to weigh these families bartered across borders, teach that empire's hunger devours not just land, but lineage turning hearths to quarries. songs to labor chants. It connects to today, your neighbor's flight from war's maw, or the veiled statistics of displaced millions funneled into unseen economies. We owe the past not pity's tears, but vigilance's forge to question the machines, humming in boardrooms and bunkers where development displaces and security scatters. Owe them the refusal to let erasure win, to amplify their echoes in conversations that bridge eras. What we build tomorrow hinges on remembering their unbuilt homes, their unmapped returns. If this narrative stirred something a pang for Lucius's chains, a fury at the gears, leave a comment below. What line lingered? Which family's defiance mirrored a modern shadow? Pose your queries. Let's unravel the threads together. These dialogues, raw as quarry dust, are how darkness yields to dawn, ensuring no silence seals final. Shapur reigned 3 decades, erecting a system that schooled every future Shah and Sultan in erasure's arithmetic: deport, divide, deploy. The blueprint lingered inked in conquest's blood, but neither did the Romans fade.